Hello! Before we get started, I want you to watch this short 1-minute clip from a glitched speedrun. Just bear with me, I promise there's a point to this. Confusing, right? What if I told you by the end of this video, you'd be able to understand everything that's happening on screen 100%?
What?
Don't believe me? Well, I guess you'll have to stay to the end of the video to find out, huh? But first, come with me for a second. We're gonna time travel all the way back to 2017. Wasn't life so much simpler? Ed Sheeran had just released The Shape of You. One of the biggest solar eclipses ever happened, and one of the best games ever made was released early on in March of that year. You might have heard of it. It's a little game called Breath of the Wild. Oh, and 1 week prior there was some small indie game about bugs. Even so, people had already been playing the sneak peek that Team Cherry had released in early February. On the day of HK's release, a user named Nim made an innocuous post in the speedrunning channel of the official Hollow Knight Discord, detailing a glitch they had discovered while speedrunning the aforementioned sneak peek. They found that if you pause the game during the intro cutscene where the knight is falling, and then immediately unpause, the player would gain control of the knight before they were intended to, enabling you to be able to skip the initial hardfall animation by opening the inventory mid-air. Nim didn't know it, but they had just discovered one of the many versions of what we now know as early control. It's probably not surprising to learn that the first patch of Hollow Knight was notoriously broken. We'll get into why in a little bit. Suffice it to say that they had not one, not two, but 17 different patches before the first major content update, Hidden Dreams, with each other update only having 1 to 4 patches each. With each patch, many of these glitches were completely removed, no matter how much or how little they broke the game, much to the chagrin of the speedrunning community. Thankfully, what Team Cherry left us with was still spaghettified enough to give glitch hunters a run for their money. As a side note, you can still access the older patches through depot downloading in the Steam console, just in case you want to try any of these older glitches yourself. Before we start going down this rabbit hole, I need to show you how HK glitches work overall. You may think that the glitches in Hollow Knight look something like this, with each glitch being its own separate instance with neat little effects here and there. In reality, it looks more like this. With the exception of most of the glitches in the game come from the player having control of the knight in instances they aren't supposed to.
What?
Why the giant foreboding sound effect? Well, that's because is an entire can of worms that we won't be opening right now. It is so messy, so complicated, so unendingly complex, it deserves its own video, so I won't be going over it here. We also already have one needlessly complicated glitch to go over, and I don't want this video to be too long. Sorry if that's a deal breaker. Along with that, I won't be covering every single teeny tiny glitch that occurs in the game. This video is mainly to document what the speedrunning community has dubbed major glitches. For example, I'm sure people won't care if I point out that in some cases, the overcharm notch effect overlays the normal notches on the first attempt at overcharming. Anyways, the stemming nature of Hollow Knight's glitches turns into more of a glitch tree of sorts. Control gaining glitches are at the top, with the unintended consequences of said glitches branching off, which themselves have their own unintended consequences, and so on. So instead of explaining the glitches in chronological order, we'll be going in order from the top of the tree to the bottom. Also, I'll be putting these little insignias next to the glitch I'm explaining, just so you know which major update those glitches are exclusive to. The markers are as follows. All patches between the release of the game and the Hidden Dreams update, the Hidden Dreams patch itself, the Grim Troop patch, the Lifeblood patch, and the Godmaster patch. So, what is this at the top of the tree? What could be so game-breaking that it would lead the entire rest of the glitch tree? Little did we know, it was hiding in plain sight the whole time. The map. More specifically, our ability to open and close the map whenever we want. This is what's known as Quickmap Storage. Quickmap Storage, as powerful as it is incredibly simple to pull off. All you have to do is very quickly press the Quickmap button, some variable button depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and the Quickmap button again. If done correctly, you'll gain control when you're otherwise unable to. This can range from many different things, such as moving while talking to an NPC, moving with your inventory open, and much, much more. This directly leads us to one of the aforementioned unintended side effects: inventory storage. There are two different kinds of inventory storage: weak IS and strong IS. They're separated as while they're technically done with the same glitch, the way you activate it can give you different effects. Weak inventory storage can be activated by our aforementioned Quickmap Storage, specifically by making the second input either focus, C-, picking something up, or opening the inventory. There's more ways to activate it, but these are the most relevant. This doesn't have any apparent effects. You basically just get to play the game with the inventory open. However, once you close the inventory, you're instantly given control of the knight back. This will be important for later. Strong inventory storage is activated by one of two ways: using Quickmap Storage to have Quickmap open during a loading zone, more commonly known as transition storage, or, on patch 1028 specifically, falling into a hazard with your inventory open, and then quickly opening the map before the hazard respawn completes. Doing so puts the knight into a strange state. You have control over the movement of the knight, but you lose the ability to use your nail, dream nail, crystal dash, or pretty much anything besides movement. You have fast fall like you would during an inventory drop, but with the added ability to move around. Strong inventory storage also leads us into dash storage. A seemingly not great side effect of strong IS is if you pause and then unpause the game, you lose control of the knight completely. This alone would not be great. However, if you were to do this in the middle of a dash, the dash's speed never gets taken away. You still can't control the knight, but you get to pass through some rooms at a much faster pace. And that was just one side effect of Quickmap Storage. Hopefully now you can see why this video took so long to research for. Another fun glitch made possible through Quickmap Storage is the notorious float glitch. This is obtained by using Quickmap Storage to gain control of the knight during the fireball animation. Or, for the stronger version of float, you can fall into certain abilities or items with the inventory open that make them float in the air, such as Vengeful Spirit or a Vessel Fragment. If you do this and turn around, you'll be stuck in this floating state, during which the knight's vertical speed is constantly being set to 0. You can only gain vertical movement as something is directly setting your speed. For example, the start of a jump, which sets your speed to 15, or running into a slope. If you go through a transition while this is active, it will turn into a permanent float, or P-float for short. This is the stronger version we just mentioned earlier. Doing so removes the restriction on your acceleration, while still not being affected by gravity. This means that your jump now goes on infinitely until colliding with a wall. It's still possible to maneuver in both floats by moving into a sloped surface or using Dash Master to dash downwards, although in normal float, you're still stuck in the air if you don't manage to touch the ground. Very similar to the float is the aptly named Slowfall glitch. It can be obtained the same way as float, except you don't do the turnaround input at the end. Doing so will make the knight slowly descend after a jump, rather than a persistent float. This is because, in the same way as P-float, our vertical speed is constantly being set to 0. However, in this version of the glitch, gravity still affects us. This is what the Slowfall is. We start getting affected by gravity, then our speed gets set to 0, and so on until it looks like we're gently drifting to the ground. This glitch is also easily removed, either by being hit by an enemy or going through a transition. A humorous side effect of float is a little thing called sliding float, or as I like to call it, the Slowfall slide. Do the exact same inputs as the Quickmap version of float or Slowfall, except delay the second Quickmap press until the sprite of the fireball comes on screen and the knight is still in the fireball animation. Now open your inventory and watch the magic happen. Another silly thing we can do with Quickmap Storage is the aptly named Rocket Jump. Simply do a normal Quickmap Storage, but press Crystal Dash instead of Fireball. Then release the Crystal Dash and time a jump correctly. And you need to be constantly holding right or left to keep moving, and hold jump as far as you want to go up. Another form of float is bad float, attained by falling into a corner to get this short floating animation. Then, if you get hit with the correct timing, it preserves it. It functions identically to P-float, except it is incredibly easy to lose, as Among other things, something as simple as hitting a wall with your nail takes it away. Next up is item duping. This glitch works by using Quickmap or inventory storage to interrupt the picking up animation the knight does when obtaining an item. Basically, the game knows to remove an item from the overworld by the completion of this animation. If you don't allow the animation to finish, the item will still be added to your inventory. If you leave the room and come back, the item will still be on the ground. Next, we have bench storage. Fairly simple to obtain. All you have to do is gain control of the knight while sitting on a bench, and then either make it to a transition without pushing any key that would otherwise make you come off the bench, meaning the up, down, jump, or attack buttons, or talk to the stag and then go sit on the bench as he transitions you. Doing so tricks the game into thinking you're on a bench anywhere, meaning you can open inventory at almost any time, equip charms anywhere, and is also useful for other glitches such as transition storage or this next glitch. However, it also has a major downside. Since the game believes you're on a bench, opening your inventory stops the knight from moving completely, as opening and closing your inventory on a bench doesn't give you control. You'll have to be prepped with another way to gain control if you open inventory with bench storage active. Alright, this next one has a silly name, and I want us all to be completely mature about it. I don't want to hear one snicker, giggle, nose exhalation, or otherwise humorous noise coming from anybody. Alright? Good. This next glitch is called SOOB glitch. It stands for bench out of bounds. Very simply, it requires you to already have bench storage active. Remember how we said we could open inventory anywhere? If you open the inventory immediately after a room loads, and before the knight's walk-in animation plays, you fall out of bounds. This glitch is usually done to get into another loading zone as fast as possible. Which leads us into our next category of glitches: out of bounds. Other than SOOB glitch, there's 3 other ways to get out of bounds: SOOB, storage out of bounds; HOOB, hazard out of bounds; and SSOOB, super slide out of bounds. SOOB is the simplest. It's very similar to SOOB, except instead of your inventory, you do a Quickmap Storage. Simply open your map during the load, and then close it before you walk into the room, and you fall out of bounds. SSOOB is next, but first we need to explain Superslides. To Superslide, all you have to do is pause on the exact same frame you kill an enemy. Pausing the game sets the timescale to 0. However, killing an enemy also briefly sets timescale to 0, but then immediately returns it to normal. So, doing both on the same frame results in the game pausing and then immediately having the timescale set back to normal. This results in the game being paused, but with time not frozen. Now do this, but add a horizontal nail slash on an enemy, and you get the super speed. This is because normally the game applies 3.75 speed to the knight every frame for nail knockback, but when the game is paused like this, you have no control and the knight's speed isn't reset properly. This means that the 3.75 speed stacks over every frame of the nail's animation, 10 frames for a total of 37.5, resulting in the super slide. For comparison, this is faster than any glitchless movement, with Crystal Dash being only 30 speed. Now we can explain SSOOB, and thankfully it's pretty simple from here. When the game is paused, loading zones are disabled. So, you simply keep the super slide going until you're out of bounds, and then unpause once you get past the loading zone. Ta-da! SSOOB. Finally, there's HOOB, the most complicated of the OOBs. HOOB is a multi-step process. Firstly, you need to run into a hazard. Next, use one of the early control methods to gain control before the hazard respawn animation finishes. Now, enter a loading zone while the hazard respawn is still happening. As the next room loads, the hazard respawn finishes before the walk-in animation does, giving you control of the knight before entering the room. Finally, all you have to do is perform an action that briefly takes away control, such as Dream Nail, starting a Crystal Dash, or using a Fireball. This will result in you being out of bounds. Let's take a quick break here. How are we doing? You guys need anything? Glass of water, perhaps? No? Good. because from here on out, things are going to get really complicated. I saved the best things for last. Learning HOOB gives us a good segue into glitches known as warps. A warp refers to a glitch that teleports the knight to an unintended location through nefarious means. There's 4 different kinds of warps: Thorn Warps, Load Warps, Hazard Warps, and Wrong Warps. Let's start with the one that's very similar to HOOB, Load Warps. First, I have to explain hazards, or more specifically, how the respawn mechanic works. You see, there are these invisible boxes in the room that when passed through, change the knight's respawn coordinates, so if you were to hit a hazard, you would respawn at that point. Our goal is quite simple. All we have to do is trigger a hazard respawn during a room transition. This is done by copying the first few steps of HOOB, but instead of letting the room transition finish, you run back and hit the hazard a second time. This confuses the game, as the hazard respawn triggers before your default location gets set, meaning the game spawns you at whatever your last hazard respawn coordinates were. Next up is Hazard Warps. It works along the same lines as HOOB, in that you trick the game into not updating your hazard respawn coordinates. Something to note is that this glitch only works on upward-facing transitions, as the game will only update your hazard respawn coordinates once this little land in the room animation plays. On the Lifeblood patch and onwards, the glitch functions like this. Do boob glitch to fall out of bounds before you can touch the ground, and keep falling until you hit this massive respawn box at the bottom of the void. Doing so will make the game spawn you at your last known hazard coordinates, as we didn't allow the game to update them by landing in the room. This trick becomes even more niche on the pre-Lifeblood patches, as Team Cherry hadn't changed the big out-of-bounds box to act like a hazard yet. In fact, if you perform the glitch in the same way, depending on what patch you're on, you would either just get stuck on this box here forever, or instantly die. This next one isn't used anymore, and is the most confusing of the 4 warps, as no one exactly knows why it works. Thorn Warping is interesting, as it requires the Thorns of Agony charm from Greenpath. For some reason, when the knight has this charm equipped, and gets hit with their inventory open into a loading zone, and the game will spawn you at the coordinates where you would have been in the last room. However, like HOOB earlier, the walk-in animation still ends up playing. Okay, this next section is sort of a grab bag of glitches that didn't really fit anywhere else in the script, so I'm putting them all here. Also, we're already on the 8th page, and I haven't even gotten to the mega complicated stuff yet, so I'm just gonna rattle them off as fast as I can to preserve the runtime. Televator, a glitch that instantly teleports an elevator to the top or bottom of its area. On Grim Troop patch and earlier, you get it by changing the elevator's direction mid-flight to stop it, then sending another input in the opposite direction while it's stationary. This puts it into a broken state, where it will teleport to its destination and bring the knight with it. It's still possible on later patches, but the method differs slightly. Full Health Fury. Have Fury of the Fallen active and get healed in an unconventional way. For example, picking up a charm notch or entering and leaving a dream. Doing so will give you the Fury effect at full health. This will be removed if you get hit, heal, sit on a bench, or quit out. Also doable with Joni's Blessing, except only via the dream method. Get to 1 HP in the dream, leave the dream, and you will have full blue mask health with Fury still active. Getting hit while doing the glitch with this method does not result in the Fury effect being removed. Dive Invulnerability. Dive with the inventory open, then close it as the knight starts to move back down. Once you leave the room, you'll lose control and are unable to cast spells. Simply press the Quickmap button to regain control, and you'll be permanently invincible. Dreamgate Shenanigans. Getting early control while using Dreamgate has 2 different results. If you use an early control method to gain control during the initial teleport animation, you'll become invulnerable. The second result is a tad more complicated, requiring you to interrupt the animation by having the arrival destination of the Dreamgate be inside water, done by gaining control in the water, causing you to fall to the floor below the water's hitbox, and placing the Dreamgate at the bottom. Knockback Storage. When you get hit, the game sets you into a knockback state, giving you iframes on a set timer. The timer runs out. It removes the invincibility and sets your knockback state to negative. If you manage to get hit while invincible, made possible by falling into a hazard, the invincibility timer will run out, but the knockback state timer will not. Then, if you get hit again and the invincibility timer runs out, you'll lose control and fly off into the sunset, as the game doesn't think to remove the knockback state. Okay guys, only 3 more glitches to go. Unfortunately, they are the most complicated out of the entire bunch, but if you've stuck with me this far, maybe you'll be willing to go just a little bit more. First off, the final warp. Wrong warps. There's a few things we need to understand. Loading zones in Hollow Knight are labeled sequentially based on which way they're facing. For example, in this room, these would be labeled left 1, up 1, and right 1. But Cactus, I hear you saying, this room has 2 loading zones going to the left. Well, very simply, that loading zone would be labeled left 2, and so on for however many loading zones there are. Now, when you load a new room, there is an exit transition variable that is updated in the code, depending on which of these exits you took. This tells the game which transition in the next room you're going to be entering from. When you hit a transition, 2 things happen. First, as soon as you hit the load zone, the game updates your exit transition variable. Then, the game begins to load the next room. If a room starts being loaded, but you hit another transition before the load completes, the exit transition variable will be changed to the newest loaded room. When the first load completes, it will place you at the corresponding updated exit transition, if possible, which means you enter the room from the incorrect location. For example, you start in room A and get early control to enter the room transition for room B twice. Your exit transition is set to left 1, and you exit out of the left 1 loading zone. Before the second load finishes loading, you re-enter the room transition to room A from room B, setting your exit transition to right 1. The game will load room B, but from the right 1 transition instead of the left. However, room A is still in the loading queue, so the first room will eventually be loaded. Wrong warping is generally only useful if continually done in a chain, so you are not sent back to any previous room. This is done by quickly entering transitions, usually by gaining control during the load-in animation, and swiftly entering another, hopefully different, loading zone. Oh, 2 more glitches. And these are doozies. Remember that thing I briefly mentioned a few seconds ago? The loading queue? That's a name that we have for this thing that keeps track of what room the knight is in, as well as what room is loading next. Firstly, the room the knight is in is always at the front of the queue. When you enter a new room, that room is placed behind the loaded room in the queue while the first room deloads. Then, when the initial room is out of the queue, the game finishes loading and spits you out into the correct room. Using this queue, it becomes possible to load multiple rooms at the same time. This is what we call room duplication, or room dupe for short. This is triggered by activating 2 loading zone sequences at once, which can be done multiple different ways. On earlier patches, on any upward-facing loading zone, if the ground is close enough to the load zone and you instantly jump back into the loading zone you just came out of, a room dupe can occur. This is because when you jump out of a loading zone, you gain control back on a timer, which coincidentally happens to be shorter than the time it takes for the room to load. The second method of room dupes involves our old pal the stag. Using a method of early control, talk to the stag and hover over the option to fast travel. Then, walk back to the entrance of the stag, and the instant you step into the zone, activate the stag and fast travel. This tricks the game into loading 2 rooms at the same time, turning the screen into a jumbled mess. This functions a little strangely, but just know that only the enemies from the room at the front of the queue get loaded in. The same goes for things like pickups and levers that open doors. The levers will still spawn, but if they're not from the active room, the door they are associated with won't open if you hit them. Now, if you were to enter another room while these 2 are loaded, only the oldest room, or the room at the front of the queue, gets removed, with the next room becoming the new active room, and the newest entered room falling into the queue behind it. This will be incredibly important for the next glitch. Speaking of, it's time for the big kahuna, the mother of all glitches. It's time to learn about infinite room duping. This glitch only occurs on Lifeblood patch onwards. It's still possible to do on the earlier patches, but it is incredibly more difficult and complicated, which is saying something, as you're about to find out. There are a few key tenets we need to remember while explaining this glitch. At any point, if you get confused, refer to the tenets. If the thing you're confused about isn't listed there, it doesn't matter and is best forgotten about. Now, when the game loads a room with a boss in it, it loads a secondary fake room that is the boss scene. I put fake in quotations because it's not a room in the sense of something you can walk through, but it is a room in the sense that the game loads it and puts it into the loading queue as if it were one. Essentially, it's a secondary superimposed layer containing only the boss floating in midair, who then can interact with the level geometry of the initial loaded room. For brevity's sake, we're going to denote the room of the boss with the color green, and the boss itself with the color purple. Which brings us to our tenets. Tenet number 1. If the game sees a green room anywhere in the queue, it will put a purple room at the end of the queue. Tenet number 2. When removing a green room from the loading queue, the game will also remove one purple room from the queue. Otherwise, the room that just got loaded would have a boss running around, and that would be silly. Tenet number 3. The game only removes non-green rooms from the queue one at a time. I'll just leave these in the corner for you. Remember, if at any point you get confused, look over there. Now, it becomes possible to infinitely stack rooms by abusing the loading queue system. To make things as clear as possible, this will show us which room the knight is currently in, and this will be the real-time view. We'll start with these two rooms loaded, red and blue. The knight goes from the blue room into the green room. The game sees a green room in the queue and puts a purple room at the end of the queue. Now, we go from green back to blue. The blue room at the front of the queue disappears, leaving the green room, the purple room, and the newly loaded blue room. But wait! Did you see it? Remember tenet number 1. There's a green room currently in the queue. It doesn't matter that this purple room already exists. All the game knows is that it sees a green room and tacks a purple room onto the end of the queue. So now, our queue looks like this. Green, purple, blue, and a secondary purple. Now, we go from the blue room back into the green room. The green room leaves the queue and brings the first purple room along with it. Our new room order is blue, purple, green, and another purple since there's a green room. We move from the green room to the blue room. Blue leaves the queue. Remember tenet number 3. Now we have purple, green, purple, blue, and another purple because of this green room. Blue to green. Purple leaves the queue, leaving us with green, purple, blue, purple, green, and... hold on. 2 green rooms? That's right. The game doesn't care that there's 2 green rooms in the queue. It sees a green room, adds a purple, sees a second green room, and adds another purple. Now our queue looks like this. Green, purple, blue, purple, green, purple, purple. And now you see where this is going. Abusing the loading queue by using the blue and purple rooms as buffers, we can stack more and more green rooms into the queue, meaning more and more bosses get loaded, and so on ad infinitum. This glitch is usually performed in a room with a Dream Warrior boss, as the essence reward they have stacks with each copied boss room. And there you have it. Oh, thanks for sticking through to the end. This video was a long time coming. I hope the shorts I've been putting out could at least whet your guys' appetite in the meantime. I have another video already in the works, but it's going to be a non-HK related video. I'm trying to branch out a little bit, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Massive, tremendous, giga thanks to the people from the HK community who helped make this video possible. Gooston13, Isnialan, Krythom, Python Wizard. Guys, thank you so much. When I tell you this video would not have been possible without them, that's the absolute truth. This was absolutely crazy to wrap my mind around. Ugh. While I do enjoy Hollow Knight the way it's intended to be, it can still be fun to see just how broken it really is. And hopefully, after this video, I made you feel the same way. If only a little. Thanks for watching.